It's a hot evening in the south of the USA. On Jackson Street, life flowed in its regular course. Children rode bicycles, neighbors shouted over the fence, discussing the latest gossip, and an old dog on the porch of one of the houses lazily caught annoying flies with his tail. Among all this there was one house, not the most noticeable, but with a special charm that could not be explained in words. The white facade was already cracked, the wooden shutters needed painting for a long time, and the sagging fence added a touch of comfort to the overall picture. It was Mabel's house. Mabel, an elderly woman with a history, knew that this place was her fortress. Despite all the difficulties, the house kept her memories like an old album with yellowed photographs. Her skin was like a map on which every line told about her past. The years spent on the plantations, the struggle for rights, losses and joys, all this was written on her face. But her eyes, warm and deep, seemed to promise that she was still young at heart. She had a ritual every evening. She sat on the porch in her rocking chair, took a cup of mint tea, and watched the sunset. It was her way of thanking life for another day. Tonight was no exception. She was sitting listening to the cicadas holding their eternal concert when a man appeared on the path leading to her house. Tall, thin, but with a confidence in his gait that she would have recognized from afar. It was her youngest grandson, Jamal. He was returning home after several years of living in the big city, and now his footsteps sounded on the dusty path like the return of the prodigal son.
Wait a minute. Who are you? Is it really my Jamal? Or do I need to wear glasses?
Jamal stopped, smiled faintly, and shook his head slightly. Grandma always liked to dramatize, but that was her charm.
It's me, Grandma. Did you finally find out? I thought you weren't happy to see me.
Glad, you say? I thought you'd already forgotten how to find your way here in the big city. Have you come to borrow money?
Her tone was harsh, but Jamal knew it was just a mask. She was always like this underneath her sarcastic words. There was a huge heart.
No, Grandma, I just decided to visit you. And the money. Well, if you offer, I won't refuse.
Mabel laughed. That laugh, loud and infectious, was her calling card. She rose from her chair, tapping her cane on the wooden porch floor.
Come here, bully. Well, what are you doing standing up there like a hillbilly at a fair? Come in, tell me what the wind brought you here.
They hugged. There was something maternal in her embrace, even though she had been more than just a mother for a long time. For Jamal, this moment was something native, almost sacred. Inside the house, everything looked the same as in his childhood. The walls were decorated with family photos, which radiated warmth. One of them was a young Mabel, with a beaming smile and lush hair. On the other is her husband, serious and a little sullen. In the center of the living room was the same table where they had once eaten cornbread together and discussed the news. Jamal sat down at the table, and Mabel took out her favorite ceramic mug from the closet, pouring him tea.
Come on, tell me, why are you drawn back to the roots? Is everything really that bad in that city of yours?
It's not that bad, Grandma. It's just. Everything is different there. People are some kind of strangers. You run all day, you work, and in the end you feel like you haven't done anything. There's no one smiling just like that, you know.
Mabel listened attentively with her head cocked to one side. Her gaze was full of understanding.
Oh, Jamal, I told you that back then. These big cities of yours are good for those who have forgotten where it comes from. But you're not like that. You're from Jackson Street. This is where you belong.
You're right, Grandma. It's just that I felt like I had to achieve something there. Do you understand? To prove something to someone. And now I'm back and I'm thinking, who do I owe what to?
Mabel came closer and put her hand on his shoulder.
Listen to me, boy. The only one you owe something to is yourself. And maybe your family, but not to the city. Not to these people who look down on you. Do you understand?
Jamal nodded. He could feel her words penetrating deeper than just his ears.
Thanks, Grandma. You always know what to say.
Of course I know. And don't you dare forget about it. Now come on, take your tea, and then tell me everything in order. What are these people of yours so annoying about?
They continued the conversation, laughing and remembering the past. Jamal talked about his failures, how he worked nights to pay the rent, and how people always looked down on him. And Mabel shared her stories about how she and his grandfather once fought for their rights, how they experienced poverty, and how they eventually realized that the main thing was to be true to themselves. This evening was something special for both of them. Jamal felt like he was returning to his roots, and Mabel was enjoying the rare moment when someone from her family actually listened to her. They both realized that this house is not just a place. This is their common home, where life goes on despite all the difficulties. Jamal entered his grandmother's house early in the morning as soon as the first rays of the sun broke through the heavy curtains of the living room. The old floor creaked so loudly under his feet that it seemed as if he was waking up not only the house but the whole neighborhood. A newspaper lay open on the table in the center of the room, and a cup stood next to it, from which a faint aroma of cold coffee rose. The house smelled like a mixture of lavender, soap, and old books. This smell was an integral part of Grandma's world. Mabel came down the stairs slowly, leaning on her cane. Her eyes shone, despite the signs of fatigue, and her lips formed a sly smile, like a person who knows more than he is ready to say.
Did you run around like a cat again at night? Or am I blind that I didn't hear you come?
Jamal, who was standing at the window and looking out at the courtyard, turned around, smiling guiltily. He had an old photograph in his hands. He found it in a stack of papers on a shelf. In the picture, young Mabel was with his grandfather, dressed in strict outfits, but with sincere smiles on their faces.
You were a queen back then, Grandma. Look at you, a real fashion icon.
Mabel squinted at the photo. Her face softened, but she immediately waved her hand, as if it didn't matter.
The queen, you say? Those old rags cost less than your sneakers now, and your grandfather had just learned how to tie a rope. What did you find there? Tell me.
Jamal put the photo on the table and sat down on a chair opposite his grandmother.
I just found it while I was looking for an old album. Do you remember how you taught me to draw? You said I had talent. And now I'm looking at these drawings and wondering how you can even say that. It's terrible.
Don't you dare talk about your art like that. You put your soul into every drawing then, and that's the main thing. And if you're such a critic now, maybe it's time to pick up a pencil again? Or are you already too important for that?
Jamal laughed, and then was silent for a moment, looking at his grandmother with warmth.
I don't know, Grandma. Back in the city, it seems that there is no place for such things. You need to be faster, stronger, more successful. And art, well, it's not for people like me.
Nonsense. Art is for everyone, even for those who decided to run away to the city and forget that they have a home. You've never been like this, Jamal. You're not the type to chase someone else's success.
His grandmother's words seemed to sting him. He looked away, feeling the weight of her rightness. As a child, Jamal really dreamed of becoming an artist, drawing comics, heroes, and his own worlds. But city life and the expectations of others forced him to abandon this path. Grandma, seeing his thoughtful expression, sat down next to him and put her hand on his shoulder.
I'm glad you're back. Even if you think you're nobody right now, I know who you are. You're my grandson, which means you can do anything if you want to.
Later in the afternoon, they decided to take a walk around the yard. Jamal helped his grandmother out onto the porch, and then they slowly walked along the fence. Mabel told him stories about the neighbors, who recently bought a new car, who got a dog, and who got into trouble with the law again. Her voice sounded light, and she laughed when she shared these gossips. Jamal listened, but his thoughts kept returning to her words. He felt that he was missing this place. He felt at home here, next to his grandmother. The city was alien, cold, demanding. And here he could be himself. They stopped at an old tree growing on the edge of the lot. It was a tree that Jamal loved as a child. He often climbed its branches, and his grandmother scolded him for ruined shirts.
Do you remember how you chased me from this tree? I climbed anyway, even when you threatened to tell Grandpa.
Of course I remember, but you know what I would never say. You were my boy. And your grandfather would only laugh. You had the heart of an explorer. You still have it. You just forgot it.
Jamal thought about her words. He looked at the tree, at its sturdy branches, at the roots going deep into the ground. This tree symbolized something more, a connection with this place, with its roots.
You're right, Grandma. It's like I've lost something trying to be someone else. Maybe I need to stop and figure out what I need.
Exactly. And you are not alone in this. You have a family. You have me. And trust me, that's enough to start over.
They continued their walk, enjoying the warm sun and silence. It was the day Jamal felt that coming home was the right decision. He realized that his grandmother had always been the anchor that held him back, even when he tried to sail too far. It's been a few days since Jamal returned to his grandmother's house. Their quiet routine established itself. Morning tea on the porch, slow walks around the yard, and long evenings over old family albums. Every corner of this house was filled with history, and every memory seemed to Jamal like a breath of air after the bustling city. But there was something else in the air, viscous, heavy. Beneath the surface of cozy everyday life, there was a silence that spoke more than words. Grandma was always strong. Her way of speaking, her actions, her resilience, everything about her screamed that she was used to coping with difficulties. But Jamal saw something he probably hadn't noticed before. Cracks in that armor. Tired eyes, a paused breath before she got up from the chair, and the look she cast at the photos, not just with warmth, but with some kind of bitter regret. On one of these evenings, they were sorting through an old box of documents. Jamal found Grandma's diaries there. Outwardly, they looked modest. Small notebooks with yellowed pages. He was surprised that his grandmother kept diaries at all. To him, she was always a person of action, not reflection. But the notes that he glanced at briefly turned out to be saturated with emotion. There were pages where Mabel talked about the difficult times when she worked from dawn to dusk on cotton plantations to feed her children. There were lines about the loss of her husband, how she raised 5 children alone, and how she once had to sell an engagement ring to pay for medical bills. But most of all, Jamal was moved by her words about her family. She wrote how she missed the children's voices in the house, how she dreamed that her children as adults would not forget their roots. Jamal also found his own references in these diaries. His grandmother described his childhood with such love and pride that it hurt him to realize how little he knew about her life. She wrote how she admired his creative abilities, how she believed that he could achieve something great. These notes were a reminder that she had always believed in him, even when he doubted himself. Every day Jamal plunged deeper into the world of his grandmother's memories. She told him about her youth, about how she and his grandfather met at a dance, about how they fought for their rights together, participating in protests, about how she once had to take refuge in a church when their house was almost burned down for refusing to obey racial laws. These stories weren't just stories. They were reminders of what his family had been through so that he could live a better life. But behind every memory, there was pain. Mabel spoke of her children with love, but there was disappointment in her voice. Her sons and daughters rarely came, too busy with their lives. She didn't blame them, but Jamal could feel her heart, yearning for the days when the house was full of laughter and bustle. One evening, while sorting through another box, Jamal found an old letter. It was addressed to his grandmother, but judging by the fact that it was lying unopened, she never read it. The handwriting on the envelope was neat but unfamiliar. Jamal, unable to contain his curiosity, opened the letter. It contained a short but sincere note from a woman who thanked Mabel for helping her through a difficult period. The woman wrote that if it hadn't been for Mabel, she would never have been able to survive. This letter was a reminder of how strong and kind his grandmother was. But there were also things that Mabel didn't want to discuss. When the conversation turned to her health, she waved it off, changing the subject. Jamal noticed how her hands were shaking, how she rarely left the house without a cane. He tried to ask her about it, but she just waved him off. Old age is not a disease, boy. We all have our weaknesses. However, he understood that it was not just about old age. Her fatigue was not only physical, but also emotional. The strength she displayed was an unbearable burden that she had carried for too long. This period has become important for Jamal. He began to realize that when he returned home, he was not only returning to his roots, but also discovering a new level of understanding of his grandmother. Her life of trials inspired him. Her struggle reminded him that real success is not a career and money, but the ability to stay true to yourself and your loved ones despite difficulties. Mabel's hidden wounds, her loneliness, fatigue, loss of loved ones, became a reminder to him that you can't ignore those who have been around all your life. For Jamal, these days were not just a time of return, but a lesson that he could not receive in any city. His grandmother had been an example of unbroken strength to him, but now he saw her vulnerability, and in that vulnerability was her real beauty. One quiet morning after breakfast, spent under the whisper of the wind and the clink of spoons on porcelain cups, Jamal came across an old, dusty chest in the far corner of the living room. He had never noticed it before, perhaps because the trunk was littered with blankets that Grandma used to hide it from view. When he opened it, he was struck by the richness of its contents: photographs, yellowed letters, antique books with inscriptions in the margins, medals, and even faded postcards with inscriptions like, "With love from Alabama." It was a real treasure trove, a repository of their family's history. Taking one of the photos, in which a young man and a woman were holding hands, Jamal realized that these were his grandparents. They looked happy, full of hope. Mabel's look in this picture was something he hadn't seen her in a long time: bright, alive. He realized that this chest was the key to her past, which could help him better understand her life. He decided that it was time to bring order to this wealth. At first, he planned to just put everything in folders to keep it from being destroyed, but as he delved into the contents, he realized how deep and rich their family's history was. Everything had a story. Every detail spoke of a time, people, and place that he knew only by hearsay. After collecting all the artifacts, Jamal suggested that Mabel start creating a family archive. At first, she reacted to this idea with disbelief, as if she did not understand why she would waste time sorting out all sorts of junk. But when he showed her an old photo of her wedding, where she stood next to her grandfather in a white dress, her eyes lit up. She agreed, but on the condition that the work would be done thoroughly. And the painstaking work began. They took out everything that mattered: old letters, birth certificates, medals, photo albums, even kitchen utensils that were part of their history. Jamal fit into this process surprisingly easily. His grandmother became a real guide to the past, telling where and when each photo was taken, to whom certain things belonged. He discovered that many of the stories he thought were funny anecdotes from her past were actually much deeper and more serious. For example, the old dress he saw in the trunk turned out to be a dress that his grandmother wore to civil rights marches. The medal with an illegible inscription was my grandfather's award for his participation in the First World War. Each object turned into a window into another world. Diving into the family archive became not only physical, but also emotional work. Jamal understood more and more how the generations of their family were connected. He realized that his successes, difficulties, and even inner doubts were the result of all the decisions his ancestors had made. Things that seemed ordinary to him suddenly acquired a symbolic meaning. His letters especially touched him. He found them in every corner of the house, in books, in boxes, in drawers with clothes. Some were from grandfather to grandmother, full of tenderness and love. Others are from her children, when they were just starting an independent life. There were letters from her friends, with whom she had once shared her innermost thoughts. Every word in these messages brought to life images of people he had never known, but with whom he now felt connected. The creation of the archive has become a ritual. Every morning they laid out the documents, and in the evening they sat on the porch and discussed what they had found. For Jamal, it was a revelation of how rich and complex their family's history was, and for Mabel, it was a way to refresh her memories and feel that her past was important. The key point was how Jamal processed the found photos. He decided to create not just an archive, but a real family chronicle. He digitized the pictures, restored the faded photos, and added notes to them with his grandmother's words. The resulting pages looked like a story in pictures, from the youth of her parents to the time when she raised her children herself. This process has become for them something more than just an analysis of antiquity. He strengthened their bond, made it deeper. Through stories and collaboration, they became closer than ever. Jamal began to see his grandmother not only as a strong woman who raised him, but also as a person who had gone through incredible trials and still retained faith in goodness. For Mabel, this process has become a kind of therapy. She has long been used to hiding her feelings, keeping the pain of loss and disappointment to herself. But now, through the memories, it was as if she was reliving moments of joy and pride. She saw how her grandson was in awe of her past, and it gave her strength. The work on the archive took several weeks. They spent hours digitizing photographs, creating records, filing letters, and even compiling a family tree. But for them, this time flew by unnoticed. These weeks have become the time when grandmother and grandson have become truly one team. They laughed, cried, argued, but most importantly, they understood each other better. When the archive was finished, they made the final touch, a large album where each page told a separate chapter of their story. On the last page, Jamal added a photo of his grandmother, taken recently after his return. Under the photo he wrote, "Thank you for teaching me to appreciate where I come from." For Jamal, this archive has become more than just a project. He became a symbol of his connection with his family, with the past, and with himself. He felt that through this job he had found something that he had long lost, his identity. And for Mabel, it was a reminder that her life was meaningful and her story will live on for generations to come. Life seemed to have settled into its usual routine. Jamal and Mabel enjoyed morning tea parties, walks around the yard, and evenings devoted to watching old movies. Their joint work on the family archive not only brought them closer together, but also gave the house a new atmosphere, a reminder of the importance of connecting generations. However, the calmness turned out to be deceptive. Soon their usual rhythm was disrupted by a sudden crisis, which made Jamal look at his grandmother in a completely different way. Nothing seemed to portend trouble. The morning began, as usual, with the smell of freshly brewed tea and sunlight filtering through the curtains. But Jamal noticed that Grandma stayed in her bedroom longer than usual. She was usually already on her feet, working in the kitchen or sitting in her rocking chair. Today, her silence was alarming. When Jamal looked into her room, he saw that Mabel was sitting on the bed, breathing heavily. Her face looked pale and her eyes looked tired. Her usually confident movements became slow and hesitant. To Jamal's questions, she just waved her hand, trying to pretend that everything was fine. But her condition suggested otherwise. Grandma's condition was getting worse. Her breathing became more and more ragged, and there were noticeable traces of pain on her face. Jamal, realizing that the matter was serious, insisted on calling a doctor. Soon a doctor came to the house, who conducted an examination and prescribed several tests. After that, he informed her that Mabel may have heart problems that require immediate treatment. This news was a blow to Jamal. Up to this point, he had always perceived his grandmother as an indomitable woman, capable of overcoming any difficulties. She was the epitome of strength and resilience for him. But now he saw her in a different light, vulnerable, in need of help. This realization turned his idea of her upside down. Strangely enough, Mabel met the news calmly. She was used to coping with life's difficulties, and this situation was no exception. However, her calmness did not calm Jamal. He felt responsible for her health and decided that he had to take care of her. The following days were a test for them. Jamal took care of his grandmother, helping her with daily chores, buying medicines and monitoring her diet. He learned how to cook her favorite dishes so that they fit her new dietary restrictions, and spent many hours reading about her condition to better understand how to help her. Jamal's daily routine had changed. If before he could afford to spend the day painting or walking, now all his attention was focused on his grandmother. It wasn't easy, but he didn't complain. He felt it was his duty, and he knew that this time he was spending with Mabel was priceless. Mabel, despite her condition, tried not to lose her fighting spirit. She continued to joke, finding reasons to laugh even in difficult moments. However, there were days when her fatigue was noticeable. She increasingly stayed in her room, resting on the bed, and her activity was minimized. For Jamal, it was a lesson in humility and understanding. He saw how life can change in an instant, and it reminded him of the importance of appreciating every moment. He began to think more about his future, about what he wants to do, and how he can keep what is dear to him. One evening, after he helped his grandmother go to bed, Jamal sat on the porch and thought. The starry sky overhead reminded him of those summer nights he spent here as a child, dreaming of who he would become. Now he realized that his dreams were important, but it was equally important not to forget about his roots and family. The crisis they faced was a challenge for them, but also an opportunity for growth. Jamal felt that he had become stronger. Taking care of his grandmother revealed qualities in him that he had never suspected before: patience, attention to detail, the ability to put another person's needs above his own. Mabel, despite her weakness, found the strength to share with her grandson the wisdom she had accumulated over the years. She told him stories about her youth, how she coped with difficulties, and how important it was not to lose faith in herself. These stories inspired Jamal, helping him cope with his own fears and doubts. Gradually, thanks to Jamal's care and prescribed treatment, Mabel's condition began to improve. This did not mean that she had fully recovered, but her breathing became smoother and her strength began to return. For both of them, it was a small victory, a reminder that even in the most difficult situations, there is hope. These events changed them both. For Mabel, it was a reminder that she can rely on her family, and for Jamal, it was a lesson about how important it is to connect with loved ones. He realized that his place was with those who loved him, and that his future lay not only with his ambitions, but also with how he would support those who supported him. It's been a few weeks since the crisis that changed Jamal and Mabel's lives. The house seemed to be filled with tranquility again, but it was a deceptive feeling. Their days became a routine full of care and mutual support. However, in this routine, feelings that had previously been hidden behind layers of family relationships and familiar intimacy began to manifest themselves. For Jamal, this time was a period of deep reflection. Taking care of his grandmother opened up something new in him that he hadn't realized before. He enjoyed spending time with her, more than he had ever imagined. In every little thing, whether it was her look, her habits, or even her stubbornness, he found something valuable. It wasn't just affection for a loved one, it was something more. He couldn't explain it in words, but he felt that something inside him was changing. Mabel also felt the changes, although she tried not to show it. Her life has always been governed by strict rules, based on family and traditions. She raised her children, raised her grandchildren, and was proud that she always put their interests above her own. But with Jamal, it was different. He was not just her grandson, he was her mainstay, her close friend in difficult times. She noticed how much he had grown in recent weeks, how his concern for her was filled with sincerity, not just a sense of duty. In the evenings, when the silence of the house was filled only with the sounds of cicadas outside the window, they often sat together, sometimes silently, sometimes remembering the past. At these moments, an invisible bond seemed to arise between them, which went beyond the usual family ties. Jamal noticed his grandmother looking at him with a smile that was filled with something he couldn't immediately recognize. There was not only love in her eyes, but also a depth that he had not noticed before. One of the turning points was the day Jamal decided to do something special for Mabel. He wanted her to feel how much he appreciated her. Inspired by their joint work on the family archive, he decided to create something personal for her. He took one of her old photographs, in which she was young, energetic, and full of hope, and began to paint her portrait. It was the first time in many years that he picked up a pencil again. His childhood hobby, long abandoned, suddenly took on a new meaning. Working on the portrait became for Jamal not just a way to express his feelings, but also a way to understand them. Every stroke of the pencil, every detail of her face that he transferred to paper, seemed to him to be part of a puzzle that he was trying to put together. He couldn't deny that his feelings for his grandmother had become more complicated. It wasn't just gratitude or respect. It was affection that he couldn't fully explain, even to himself. When the portrait was finished, Jamal felt strangely calm. He realized that his feelings for his grandmother did not fit into the usual framework, but he did not feel fear or shame because of this. It was just a feeling of rightness, as if his heart had found what it was looking for. For Mabel, this portrait was an unexpected gift. When Jamal showed it to her, she was amazed. She saw not only her face, but also how he sees her. Strong, beautiful, full of life. At that moment, she realized that Jamal was also more than just a grandson to her. This realization was both frightening and liberating. She saw in him a man who understood her better than anyone else. These feelings began to manifest themselves in their daily lives. Mabel noticed how her heart skipped a beat when Jamal touched her hand, helping her to get up from the chair. Jamal, in turn, became more attentive to her words, gestures, even to her silence. Their bond grew deeper and deeper, and it was something they both began to realize. But with this realization came doubts. Mabel, despite her feelings, understood that society would never accept what she was beginning to feel. Her age, her status, her role in the family, all this was a barrier. She struggled with herself, trying to suppress what was beginning to blossom in her heart. Jamal was also aware that their feelings were complicated and did not fit into the usual framework, but he couldn't deny their existence. It was a challenge for both of them. They felt that their bond was unique, but they were afraid of the consequences. Every day they teetered on the edge, trying to figure out how to be honest with themselves, but not destroy what they have. These feelings became their common secret, which they could not share even with themselves. However, despite their doubts and fears, their bond grew stronger. every moment they spent together only confirmed that they had found something rare and valuable. It was more than family love. It was a spiritual closeness that united them despite all the obstacles. The day came when Jamal and Mabel could no longer ignore the feelings that were growing between them. Their lives, full of minutiae and rituals, seemed harmonious from the outside, but emotions and doubts raged inside each of them. This harmony was like a thin web, ready to burst at the slightest movement. They both understood. They needed to talk. They needed to put everything in its place in order to figure out where to move on. For Mabel, this realization was especially difficult. She has lived a long life filled with difficulties, joys, and losses. Her children, grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren have become her pride and the meaning of life. But what she began to feel for Jamal was something she couldn't explain to herself or anyone else. She knew that her feelings were out of the ordinary, and it scared her. At the same time, she felt that these emotions were sincere and honest, that they came from the very heart. Jamal also felt lost. He had returned home to find himself, and now he realized that he had found something more. But this more was so complicated that he was afraid to even think about it. He respected his grandmother, admired her, and saw her as a source of strength and inspiration. But his feelings crossed the boundaries of ordinary love for a loved one. They became deeper, almost connected them on a spiritual level. One evening, when the house was silent and night reigned outside the windows, both felt that this moment had come. This was not a conversation that could be postponed. It was a moment when the truth had to be told, even if it turned out to be painful. Mabel started talking first. She told about her life, about how the loss of her husband left a void in her heart that she could not fill, about how her children, whom she loved more than anything in the world, gradually drifted away from her. She admitted that her house became a quiet refuge for her, but at the same time it became a place where she felt lonely. And everything changed when Jamal returned. His care, attention, and love gave her a new breath. She felt alive. Jamal listened without interrupting. He knew that her words were important, that they were the key to understanding how they both felt. When it was his turn to speak, he talked about his fears, about how he lost himself in the city, how he felt lonely among a lot of people, and how his return to his grandmother became for him a return to the roots, to the origins. He admitted that he found in her not only a loved one, but also something more, a spiritual partner, a person who understands him like no one else. They didn't try to hide their emotions. Everyone spoke sincerely, with pain and relief at the same time. Mabel realized that their feelings could not be ignored, but their nature made the situation difficult. She knew they both had to find a way to live with those feelings without destroying what they had. After all, love is not always expressed through romance. Sometimes it finds its embodiment in a deep spiritual connection that goes beyond the usual relations. For Jamal, it was a moment of acceptance. He realized that his feelings didn't make him worse, didn't make him weird or wrong. These feelings were a natural response to the love and care he received from his grandmother. But he also realized that their bond couldn't be broken by trying to make it something more than it is now. He accepted that their love would be special, unique, but not violating the boundaries of the family. They decided to leave their feelings on a spiritual level. It was a difficult decision, but they both knew it was the right one. Their love was strong, but it didn't need to be confirmed through actions or words. She was valuable in her own right, existing simply because they were together. The following days became a period of inner peace for them. They realized that their bond was stronger now than ever. Grandma continued to share her stories, and Jamal continued to share his plans for the future. They found solace in the fact that their feelings, though complex, became a source of strength for them, not pain. Jamal decided to stay in his hometown. He found an art-related job and started doing what he always wanted to do: paint. But now his work was filled with meaning. He painted what was dear to him: landscapes associated with the house, portraits of his family members, scenes from the past. Each painting was a tribute to the roots he had found thanks to his grandmother. Mabel, despite her age and illness, has found a new meaning in life. She didn't feel lonely anymore. She knew that her life was meaningful, that her grandson would remember her, her story, what she had given him. She was proud of him, proud of the man he had become. Their connection became the basis for something more. Jamal and Mabel not only became closer to each other, they became an example of how love can take different forms. Their story became a reminder that true love knows no boundaries, but always requires honesty and respect. After those frank conversations, life in the house on Jackson Street began to gradually return to its usual rhythm. However, something has changed. Their connection, previously hidden under a layer of understatement, has now taken on a form that only the two of them can understand. The love between Jamal and Mabel has become more conscious and harmonious, as if both had found their place in the world. But life couldn't stand still. Time demanded that they move forward. Jamal, inspired by his grandmother's wisdom and the history of their family, began to actively work on his art. He got a job at a local cultural center where he taught children the basics of drawing and painting. For him, it became not only a way to earn money, but also a chance to pass on his values to the next generation. His paintings, filled with symbolism and soul, began to attract attention. He painted scenes from his family's past: his grandmother in her youth, her protests for rights, his grandfather on the farm. Each painting told the story of struggle, love, and the connection of generations. These works resonated with local residents, and later, beyond their small town. His exhibition Roots and Crowns became a real event, attracting people who were looking for something sincere and deep. But what pleased Jamal the most was that he was able to feel like a creator again. Art became a way for him to deal with any internal contradictions. He thanked Mabel for this, because it was her stories that inspired him to return to what he had loved since childhood. For Mabel, this new chapter of her life has become no less significant. Her health still required attention, but her spirit seemed to have become stronger. She saw her grandson flourish, and it brought her great satisfaction. In the house on Jackson Street, she decided to open a small corner of memory, a family museum. There they placed the previously created archive, antique objects, photographs and letters. Neighbors often stopped by to see this corner of history, and each time Mabel was happy to share stories about her family. She's become an important figure in the community. People came to her for advice, shared their experiences, and she responded with the same wisdom that helped Jamal. Her house became the center of a small world in which warmth and understanding reigned. Despite all the joy, fate continued to throw up trials. One day, Mabel's condition worsened. Her health required more serious intervention, and she ended up in the hospital. It was a real shock for Jamal. He realized how much he depended on her, how much his world was tied to her presence. In a hospital room filled with sterile light, Jamal sat next to her bed for hours, holding her hand. These moments reminded him that time is inexorable and that their days together are limited. He decided that he had to do something significant so that their story would not end there. After returning home, he began working on his most ambitious painting, a huge canvas, which he called a living tree. The painting depicted a huge tree, the roots of which went deep into the ground, and the branches were full of bright leaves and fruits. Jamal imprinted symbols of his family in every root and branch, scenes from the past, portraits of ancestors, details that he learned from his grandmother's stories. When the painting was completed, he put on an exhibition right at Mabel's house. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers came to see this work. But for Jamal, it was not just a work of art. It was his declaration of love for his grandmother, for their connection. Mabel returned home, weak but full of pride for her grandson. She saw the painting and shed tears. There was everything in her eyes: gratitude, pride, love. For her, it was proof that her life had not been in vain, that her efforts, her struggle, and her love had left a mark. The last years of their life together were spent in peace and quiet. They have learned to accept their feelings as they are, without fear or shame. Their relationship has become a symbol of the fact that true love is not always passion or romance. It can be deep respect, support, and understanding. When Mabel left this world, Jamal stayed, but he didn't feel lonely. Her spirit, her wisdom, and her love continued to live in him. He became the keeper of her memory, the man who brought her stories to the next generations. Jamal continued to draw and share her stories. The painting, The Living Tree, became the central part of the exhibition, which toured many cities. People were inspired by this work, finding in it a reflection of their own family stories. But for Jamal, it was more than that. It was his declaration of love for the woman who changed his life. The house on Jackson Street has become a place of memory and inspiration. He continued to receive guests, share family history, and Jamal, now an adult and confident man, talked about that amazing woman who taught him to love and appreciate life. Their bond, which has survived trials and prohibitions, has remained forever, defying neither time nor circumstances. It was a love story that found its continuation in the hearts of those who were ready to hear it. The hot evening on Jackson Street was as measured as ever, but Jamal's soul was seething. He was sitting on the porch of his grandmother's house, watching the sun slowly slide below the horizon, coloring the sky in soft orange tones. Returning home was both a relief and a challenge. The big city, where he had spent the last few years, had disappointed him with its coldness, but when he returned here, to his native home, he could not get rid of the feeling that he was missing something. That evening, he helped Grandma finish dinner. They ate in silence, not because it was uncomfortable, but because the silence seemed cozy to them. After dinner, while sorting through an old closet in the living room, he accidentally came across a box sealed with duct tape. It looked so dusty that it had obviously not been opened for several years. Jamal carefully tore off the tape and lifted the lid. His gaze immediately fell on a pile of yellowed sheets and worn albums. At the very top was his childhood drawing, a crookedly painted mottled bird against a sunset background. He grinned at his childhood creativity. It was the same work that he had once painted in the kitchen, sitting next to his grandmother.
Hey, Grandma, do you remember this?
Mabel looked at the drawing and slowly raised her eyebrows.
But how can you not remember? This is your first great painting. You puffed for half a day then, and then you were so proud that you almost glued it to the refrigerator.
Jamal laughed, but inside he felt a slight burning sensation. He hadn't held a pencil or brush in his hands for a long time. Even at school, drawing was something special for him, almost sacred. But years have passed, and reality had supplanted his dreams. He continued sorting through the contents of the box. There were other works of his, an old sketchbook, several pencils, almost worn to the ground, and even a small album with his first comics. There were postcards and letters nearby. Grandma always kept such things as if they were a part of herself.
Have you been keeping my old drawings all this time? Why?
What not? Every drawing is a part of you. Those birds of yours, the trees, the funny little men, it all reminded me of what you used to be. You know, you were completely different then.
What kind of other?
Happy, creative, brave. And now look at yourself. You're all serious. Like you're working as a lawyer or, God forgive me, an accountant.
Jamal wanted to object, but the words stuck in his throat. Her words hit me in the heart. He really was different. Remembering his student years, he realized how much he had changed. All his dreams of drawing were replaced by work that did not bring joy. He was running for success, but he couldn't feel successful. He picked up one of his drawings, a portrait of a girl with huge eyes, which he made as a teenager. The lines were rough, but there was a soul in this drawing. He looked at it and felt the old desire to draw reawaken.
You know, Grandma, everything is completely different in the city. There's no time to stop and think about such things. You need to run, work, achieve something. I didn't even have time to remember who I was before.
Jamal? This is your city. You keep talking about him like he's some kind of monster, but you chose to go there yourself. You wanted to achieve something, right?
You did. And I thought I could do it. But now I'm not sure I even know what I want.
Mabel, leaning on her cane, slowly walked up to him and put her hand on his shoulder.
My boy, success is not something that anyone can give you. This is how you feel when you do something that you really love. Do you remember how you looked at your drawings when you were little? There was a light in your eyes, Jamal. And now, all I see is fatigue.
Jamal felt his throat constrict. He didn't want his grandmother to see his weakness, but her words were so precise that it became difficult for him to breathe. He got up, put the drawing on the table, and went out onto the porch. The night air was cool, and he took a deep breath, trying to control his emotions. A few minutes later, Mabel came up to him. She sat down on her rocking chair, holding a cup of tea in her hands.
You've always been stubborn, but stubbornness sometimes prevents us from recognizing what is truly important.
But what should I do now? Start drawing again? It's stupid. I'm an adult now. I don't have time for these childhood hobbies.
Mabel snorted, her eyes sparkling.
Stupid? You know what's stupid? To live as if you have a spare life. Do you want to be happy? Then do what makes you happy. Everything else is just empty excuses.
Her words sounded like a sentence. Jamal was silent, looking at the stars. He remembered how, as a child, he sat on this very porch and dreamed of becoming a great artist. Back then, he believed that anything was possible. Now, he felt that he had lost that faith.
Do you think there's anything else I can do?
I think that if you stop thinking and start acting, then you will succeed. Try it, Jamal. Just try it. You've always been my talented boy.
Her voice was soft, but there was strength in it. Jamal looked at his grandmother and nodded. He realized that he had to try, if only for her sake. The next morning, he took out his old pencils and began to draw. For the first time in many years, he felt alive. And although the line on the paper was uneven, the light came back on in his soul. The morning on Jackson Street began with the usual routine. Mabel, as usual, was sitting on her porch with a cup of mint tea, watching the neighbors talking over the fence and the children riding bicycles. But for Jamal, this day was special. After much thought, he finally decided to offer his grandmother an idea that had been bothering him for the past few days. Looking through the old drawings and papers they found in the closet, he realized more and more how rich their family's history was. Each photo, each document told its own story. Jamal wanted to keep it all, but not just put it in a box, but do something meaningful. He wanted to create a family chronicle, a project that could unite them and preserve their legacy for future generations.
Grandma, I've been thinking, we have so many stories. You know everything about our family, every corner of this house, every little thing. What if we do something that saves it?
Mabel, without taking her eyes off the neighbor's cat, which was lazily stretching in the sun, only raised an eyebrow.
Save something? For example, put all this stuff back in the box and forget it for another 20 years.
No, it's not like that. Let's make a family record. It's like an album with photos, letters, and drawings. You're gonna tell stories, and I'm gonna make it all out.
Her face softened slightly, but her gaze remained skeptical.
Do you want me to sit here for hours and reminisce about my past? Do you even realize how much there was?
I understand, but it's not just for me. It's for all of us. For your children, for their children. You always say that family is the most important thing. Why not save it all for future generations?
She sighed, sipped her tea, and thought about it. Her gaze became more focused.
You know, you're right. Too many things go with us when we are no more. Okay, I agree. But only if you don't make me sit and tell you every little thing. It's too boring.
Jamal smiled. He knew that this agreement was half the success. Now they had to get to work. The process began with them pulling boxes out of cupboards, chests and shelves. Each item was like a key to the past. Among the old photographs and letters were faded postcards, withered flowers, diaries, and even medals. Whenever Jamal found something unusual, he asked questions, and Mabel answered, sometimes irritably, sometimes with a smile.
Grandma, what is this piece of cloth? It looked like part of some kind of dress. That was the dress I wore to the first Rights March. It tore when one of the policemen grabbed my arm. I left a piece as a keepsake.
Have you been to the marches? Why didn't you ever talk about it?
Some things we don't tell because we think no one will want to listen to them. Now I understand that I was wrong.
Every such moment was a small revelation for Jamal. He learned that his grandmother was not just a woman who took care of the house and family, but a person with an amazing story full of struggle, pain, and strength. When all the materials were collected, they sat down at the table to decide what their family chronicle would look like. Jamal suggested dividing it into chapters: the grandmother's youth, her marriage, the life of her children and grandchildren, as well as her participation in historical events. Mabel agreed, but insisted on adding a section about her friends and neighbors, who were also an important part of her life.
Do you think family is only those who are connected by blood? No, my boy. Family is also those who are there when you need them.
Good. Let's add a separate section. It will be neighbors and friends. You're going to tell me about everyone who was with you.
Oh, you're going to regret suggesting this. I have stories for the month ahead.
They laughed while discussing the plan. This was the first step towards creating something truly meaningful. Jamal started digitizing old photos and adding grandmother's stories to them. Each photo received a signature, who is depicted on it, when it was made, and what was happening at that moment. For example, one photo showed her husband standing on the porch with a wide-brimmed hat. The signature read, "John Mason, the man who could fix anything but his hat."
Grandma, what is this photo of Grandpa holding that giant fish?
Oh, it was our first trip to the lake. He wanted to show me that he could fish. This poor fish probably weighed more than he did, but he was so proud that I couldn't help but take a picture of him.
Together they laughed at old pictures, discussed funny and touching moments. In the middle of the work, the project began to slip. Mabel got tired of talking, and Jamal felt like he was losing his inspiration. However, one day, Grandma took her old diary out of the trunk and handed it to her grandson.
Everything is here. Everything that I don't have time to tell. Read it, and maybe you'll find what you were looking for there.
Reading the diary was a real revelation for Jamal. He learned about the difficulties she had gone through, about her fears and joys. It gave him a new boost of energy. He realized that their project is not just an album, it's a whole story that needs to be preserved. After several weeks of hard work, they finished the first chapter of the chronicle. She talked about Mabel's youth, her parents, and her childhood. Jamal added his own illustrations there, portraits of her parents, drawings of her first home, and even the very torn fabric from the dress that became a symbol of her strength. When they were done, Mabel looked at the result and nodded slowly.
You did it, boy. It's beautiful. Now I can be sure that our story will not be lost.
This is just the beginning, Grandma. We have many more stories ahead of us.
They both felt that they had done something important. It wasn't just preserving the past. It was creating something that connected them even more. The project became for them not only a way to preserve family history, but also the time they spent together, laughing, arguing, and getting to know each other anew. And that was the most valuable thing. The work on the family chronicle progressed with unexpected enthusiasm. Jamal and his grandmother created a whole system. They devoted the morning to analyzing old things and discussing stories, and in the evening, Jamal systematized everything he found, recorded her stories, and processed photos. It became their common cause, which filled the house with laughter, conversation, and warmth. But one day, this process revealed something that unexpectedly changed the atmosphere in their small world. One day, Jamal came across a chest standing in the corner of the attic. This chest looked different from the others. It was not so dusty, and surprisingly well preserved. Its sturdy metal locks seemed newer than anything they had disassembled before. Jamal opened it curiously, expecting to find another set of photos or letters there. But the contents turned out to be different. The trunk contained old, neatly folded documents, certificates, old records, and several envelopes with letters. Jamal's attention was immediately attracted by the letters. Some of them had neither the address of the sender nor the addressee, only the dates. The first envelope was marked 1948. Jamal did not immediately realize how important their contents would be. The letters talked about the hard times that Mabel went through in her youth. Among the lines, events were mentioned that she never talked about: a failed marriage, the early loss of a child, financial difficulties. One of the letters, written by Mabel, was addressed to a woman named Clara. It became clear from the text that Clara was her close friend, and perhaps the only person Mabel trusted during that difficult period. Each letter revealed something new. Emotions flashed among the lines, which Jamal could not even guess at: fear, pain, hope, despair. It was a completely different view of Mabel, unlike the strong and confident woman she seemed to be now. In one of the letters, she described how she was once homeless after her first husband lost all his money at cards. She wrote to Clara about how she was trying to find a job, how she slept on the floor in the house of her distant relatives, and how she dreamed of a future where she could build her own house. Jamal was stunned. He didn't know this side of Grandma. She had always seemed to him a fortress, unshakable and confident, but now he saw her differently: vulnerable, emotional, in pain. It became clear to him that her current strength was not a natural quality, but the result of all the trials she had to overcome. Jamal didn't know what to do. On the one hand, he felt that he had found a treasure that would help them make the family record even more complete and meaningful. But on the other hand, he was aware that this treasure was a part of her personal life that she might never have intended to talk about. He was afraid that if he showed her these letters, he would violate her trust. He spent the whole night thinking about his actions. He imagined how his grandmother would react to what he had found. Would she be angry? Would he be upset? Or would she feel relieved, knowing that someone had finally found out her secrets? These questions haunted him. The next day, Jamal decided to talk to his grandmother. He began the conversation cautiously, mentioning that he had found a trunk with her old things in the attic. Mabel, who usually reacted easily to such findings, immediately tensed up. Her face changed, as if she knew what he was going to say. When Jamal showed her one of the letters, she froze for a moment. Her eyes skimmed over the lines, and a mixture of emotions appeared in them: sadness, anger, fatigue. She put down the letter and silently looked at her grandson. It was one of those rare moments when her strong appearance cracked, revealing her vulnerability. Mabel told Jamal about how in her youth she had to go through a series of losses and disappointments. She explained that she had never shared this part of her life because she believed that the past should remain in the past. Her children knew about these events only superficially, but none of them knew the whole truth. She explained that her first husband was a cruel and irresponsible man. that because of him she lost her home and had to seek help from distant relatives. She talked about how Clara became her salvation during that period, supporting her mentally and helping her find a job. This friendship has become a symbol of hope for her. For Jamal, this confession was a turning point. He saw in his grandmother not just a woman who raised him with love and care, but a man with a rich and complicated past. Her difficulties in life did not break her, but hardened her. He realized that her wisdom, her ability to support and guide him, was the result of everything she had been through. This conversation also changed his attitude towards their project. He realized that the family chronicle should be not only about joyful moments, but also about difficulties. It should be an honest and complete portrayal of their story. After this frank conversation, their work on the chronicle acquired a new depth. Mabel began to share stories that had previously remained untold. She talked about her first marriage, her friendship with Clara, and how she had to learn to be strong in a world that was set against her. Jamal wrote down every detail, realizing that these stories are the basis of their family identity. Now their project has become something more than just a collection of photos and letters. It was a chronicle not only of the past, but also of how the past shapes the present and the future. Jamal felt that this was their common way, not only to preserve family history, but also to understand each other more deeply. The letters they found and the revelations that followed them became an important milestone in their work. It was a moment that revealed to Jamal the real Mabel, a woman with incredible fortitude and a rich inner world. It was also a kind of liberation for her. Now she could look at her life not only through the prism of pain, but also through the prism of pride in what she had managed to overcome. Their bond has become stronger, and the family record has become richer and more truthful. They both realized that their stories were important, and that every detail, even the most painful, deserved to be told. Work on the family chronicle continued, but life reminded of its inexorable course. Everything changed on one of the cool autumn days when the warm sun gave way to a cool wind, as if foreshadowing the coming changes. Mabel looked tired. Her movements had become slower, and the energy she had radiated during their recent discussions had begun to fade. Jamal noticed it, but didn't pay attention. He blamed her weakness on her age and fatigue from their work. However, her condition worsened every day. She began to complain of fatigue and dizziness, and sometimes her breathing became ragged. Simple things like walking around the yard or going down the stairs were difficult for her. One morning she couldn't get out of bed. Jamal was alarmed and immediately realized that the matter was more serious than he had imagined. The doctor he called on the same day examined her and prescribed tests. According to him, Mabel could have heart problems and needed constant monitoring and treatment. This news came as a real shock to Jamal. Until that moment, he had perceived his grandmother as an indomitable force, a person who had endured so many difficulties and remained standing. Now he realized that her body was not as strong as her spirit. Jamal's life has changed dramatically. He had to take care of his grandmother. Every day he helped her get up, cooked food, and monitored her medications. Their rhythm of life slowed down. There were no more morning reviews of old things or long evening conversations. Now everything revolved around her health. Jamal tried his best, but sometimes he felt helpless. He was not used to the role of a guardian, and it became a test for him. Sometimes it seemed to him that he was not doing enough, that he could have been more attentive or caring. But Mabel, despite her condition, continued to support him. She did not allow herself to complain, trying to preserve the very inner strength that she had radiated all her life. These days had become for Jamal a time of not only physical but also emotional ordeal. He felt how deeply his grandmother had taken root in his life, how her presence had become an integral part of his existence. The thought of losing her was becoming unbearable. His work on the chronicle temporarily stopped. Every time he tried to get back to her, he was overcome by a wave of guilt. He felt that he should devote all his time to his grandmother and not to the project. However, her stories and their work together became not only memories for him, but also a source of comfort. He began reading her diaries, looking through photos, trying to find strength in her past trials. Mabel's periods of declining health were becoming more frequent. Night attacks of weakness, the need to call an ambulance, the constant fear for her life. All this put a heavy burden on Jamal's shoulders. But despite this, he found the strength to cope. Every time he saw her smile or thank him for his help, he felt that it wasn't all in vain. Taking care of his grandmother taught him a lot. He began to appreciate every moment he spent with her, to understand how important little things were, such as conversations over tea, or her calm voice telling about the past. These moments became an anchor for him, holding him in reality. The crisis reached its peak one night when Mabel had a severe attack. Her breathing became ragged and her skin became pale. Jamal wasted no time in calling an ambulance. At the hospital, doctors reported that her heart condition had deteriorated, and now she would need constant medical supervision. She was supposed to stay in the hospital for a few days to stabilize. These days have become a time of reflection for Jamal. He sat for hours in the hospital room, holding her hand, looking at her, so strong and at the same time vulnerable. He felt the realization growing inside him that he had to change something in his life in order to be with her. He realized that he couldn't let time pass by anymore. After her return home, their lives regained order, but this time Jamal began to act differently. He arranged everything so that her days would be as comfortable as possible. He rebuilt the house so that she didn't have to climb stairs, bought a comfortable armchair, and learned how to cook her favorite dishes so that they would meet the new dietary restrictions. But the main change was his attitude. If he had previously perceived his grandmother as an indestructible fortress, now he saw her as a person who needed him. This realization became a source of strength for him. He began to appreciate her even more and tried to be someone for her who could give her support in a difficult moment. When Mabel's condition improved slightly, she insisted that Jamal return to work on the Chronicle. It was important to her, not just as a project, but as a way to keep them connected. Jamal began working with renewed vigor, realizing that their collaboration was not only a way to preserve her story, but also a tribute to everything she had been through. He included chapters in the Chronicle about her last trials, her strength, and their work together. It became a way to perpetuate their bond, to show that their story is not only the past, but also the present, full of trials, but also love. This crisis has changed them both. For Jamal, it was a lesson about the importance of family, how quickly circumstances can change, and how important it is to appreciate every moment. For Mabel, it was a confirmation that she was not alone, that her grandson was ready to be there no matter what. Their joint work on the Chronicle became even more important. Now it was not just a project, but a symbol of their connection, their overcoming difficulties, and the love that became the basis of everything. It's been a few months since Jamal and Mabel went through a crisis. Her health had stabilized, but the need for constant care reminded them that time was inexorable. Despite this, their work on the family chronicle not only continued, but also gained a new meaning. It became not just a project for them, but a way to show the whole world the strength of their connection and the richness of their family history. Every day, Jamal became more and more immersed in the creation of the chronicle. While working on photographs and illustrations, he realized that this was not just a hobby, it was his vocation. Every page, every story he designed filled him with inspiration. After many years of doubt, he started painting again, but now it wasn't just a hobby. It became a way to express everything he felt for his grandmother, for their family, for life in general. Jamal began to create paintings inspired by his grandmother's stories. His first work is a huge portrait of Mabel in her youth, surrounded by the symbols of her life, books, trees, a house on Jackson Street. It was not just a portrait, but a whole story told through images. In this painting, he showed her not only as a grandmother, but also as a woman who went through difficulties, preserving dignity and inner strength. One day, while sorting through the family archive, Jamal realized that this story deserves to be told not only for their family, but also for a wide audience. He realized that their chronicle is not just a personal project, but something more. This is a reminder of how important it is to remember your roots, respect the older generation, and appreciate every little thing that makes a family unique. The idea of the exhibition came to him suddenly. He decided that he wanted to combine art and family history to share it with others. The exhibition was supposed to be a bridge between generations, a place where visitors could feel the same warmth and depth that he experienced while working on this project. The preparation took several months. Jamal immersed himself in his work, creating a series of paintings and installations, each of which told a separate chapter of their story. He drew inspiration from his grandmother's stories, old photographs, letters, and objects found in the house. Each work was imbued with the spirit of their family. One of the central works was the painting, The Living Tree. It depicted a huge tree with powerful roots and spreading branches. In the roots of the tree, he depicted scenes from his grandmother's youth, her first home, a march for rights, a portrait of her parents. On the branches were images of her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. It was not just a tree, but a symbol of their family, their history, which continues to grow and develop. Another important part of the exhibition was the installation of old things, letters, medals, faded fabrics, and books. Each item was accompanied by an explanation that told the story associated with it. These artifacts became not just exhibits, but living evidence of the past, which Mabel and Jamal sought to preserve. When the idea of the exhibition was made public, it received widespread support. Neighbors, friends, and even local organizations offered to help. People brought their old photos, shared their memories, and offered to place them at the exhibition. It was a reminder that the story of one family can be linked to the stories of many other people. The local cultural center has agreed to provide space for the exhibition. It was a spacious hall with high ceilings and large windows, which was ideal for displaying paintings and installations. Jamal carefully thought out the placement of each exhibit so that the audience could feel the full depth of their story. The opening day of the exhibition was an important event not only for Jamal and Mabel, but also for their entire community. The hall was filled with people, relatives, friends, neighbors, local journalists, and just curious visitors. The atmosphere was filled with warmth and expectation. Mabel, dressed in her best dress, sat in the front row, proudly watching her grandson present their work to the public. She couldn't hide her pride, seeing how their story aroused the interest and admiration of others. Jamal's speech was short but sincere. He talked about how this project became a way for them to get closer, understand each other, and preserve the memory of those who came before them. He stressed that the history of the family is not only their personal heritage, but also a part of the common cultural heritage that deserves to be preserved. The exhibition caused a storm of emotions. Many viewers were touched by the depth and sincerity of the works. The painting, The Living Tree, became the central exhibit and evoked a special response from visitors. People shared their stories, remembered their grandparents, and thought about their roots. This was exactly what Jamal wanted to achieve, to awaken people's awareness of the importance of memory and the connection of generations. Some visitors left thank you notes, where they wrote that this exhibition inspired them to start working on preserving their own family stories. Jamal realized that his work was not in vain. He managed to convey to people the sincere love and respect for his family that had been driving him all this time. This success was an important turning point for Jamal. He felt that he had found his calling. His work has gained a new meaning. It has become not only a way of self-expression, but also a way to convey important values to the world. He realized that his strength lies in his ability to turn personal stories into art that touches people's hearts. Now he saw himself not only as an artist, but also as a storyteller, the keeper of his family's history. His paintings became a way for him to preserve the memory of those who came before him and inspire those who will come after. For Mabel, this day was the culmination of her life. She saw that her efforts to raise a family, her struggle, and her love were reflected in her grandson's work. She felt proud, knowing that her story would now live not only in her memories, but also in the hearts of the people who saw this exhibition. The exhibition has become not just a successful project, but a real celebration of life, family, and creativity. She brought people together, inspired them, and reminded them of the importance of remembering their roots. For Jamal and Mabel, it was not only an achievement, but also a confirmation of their unique bond, which became the basis for something truly great. After the successful exhibition, life on Jackson Street began to change. The house that once seemed like a quiet haven for Mabel had now become a meeting place for her family, friends, and neighbors. People came to see Jamal's work, to hear the stories Mabel told, and to feel the warmth that permeated this house. But the main change was that Mabel's health began to improve. The care, love, and energy that Jamal surrounded her with restored her strength. The recovery process has been slow but steady. Jamal, as a man who learned to take care of his grandmother during her difficult days, continued to monitor her health. Regular walks, proper nutrition, and fresh air have become part of their daily lives. But the most important thing was that Grandma regained her inspiration and desire to live. After the exhibition, Mabel felt that her story was really important. She saw how her past inspired not only Jamal, but also many people from their community. This understanding gave her strength. She no longer felt like an elderly woman living in the shadow of her past. Now she was the bearer of a story that brought people together and reminded them of the importance of their roots. Despite the fact that most of the work on the family chronicle was completed, Mabel and Jamal decided not to stop. They started adding new chapters, talking about their exhibition, people's responses, and how their project affected the lives of others. Mabel insisted on including a section dedicated to the community that supported them through difficult times. It was her way of expressing gratitude. The chronicle became not just a book of memories, but a living document that continued to grow and develop. Jamal added new illustrations inspired by his grandmother's stories and created images that reflected her strength and spirit. The house on Jackson Street became a cultural center. Neighbors and friends began to offer their stories and objects for exhibitions. This turned the family museum into a place where not only the history of one family was kept, but also the history of the entire community. People came here not only for memories, but also for inspiration. Jamal organized meetings where neighbors shared their stories. He recorded them and created new paintings inspired by their memories. Gradually, the house became a place where the past was connected with the present, and the memory of former times helped to build the future. After the success of the first exhibition, Jamal began to receive offers from other galleries and organizations. His work became popular, but he never forgot how it all started. He remained true to his style and continued to draw inspiration from the stories of his family and their lives on Jackson Street. One of his new projects was the series of paintings Roots and Wings, dedicated to people who found the strength to overcome difficulties and become stronger. This series became a symbol of his own path and how he learned to appreciate every part of his life. Over time, the house on Jackson Street was filled with the sounds of laughter and joy again. Inspired by her improved health, Mabel began inviting grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and even neighborhood children to tell them stories, play old board games, and share her wisdom. Her energy and love of life had an infectious effect on everyone around her. Jamal, watching this, felt confidence growing inside him in the future. He saw that his grandmother was happy again, and that was the main thing for him. She has become a symbol of how love, care, and creativity can restore a person's strength. While working on the chronicle and creating paintings, Jamal realized that the real strength of the family lies in its history, in its connection with the past. Mabel showed him how important it is to maintain these connections, how important it is to remember your ancestors and respect their heritage. This realization became his main principle in life. He began organizing workshops and meetings where he taught children and teenagers to draw and write down the stories of their families. His project turned into a whole movement that helped people take a fresh look at their roots. Despite the fact that the years were inexorably passing, Mabel remained strong. She has become for many a symbol of perseverance and wisdom. Her energy inspired people not to give up in the face of difficulties, and her stories, showed how important it is to believe in yourself. Mabel continued to be actively involved in the life of her community, and Jamal became her assistant and ally. Together, they created something more than just a family record. They gave people the opportunity to feel like they were part of something bigger, a piece of history that unites generations. Life on Jackson Street has taken on a new lease of life. The house became a place where the heritage of not only one family, but also the entire community was preserved. Mabel, who once thought her life was coming to an end, now felt filled with strength and energy. She saw how her story continues to live on in her grandson's works, in the annals and in the hearts of those who came to their house. For Jamal, it was the beginning of a new chapter. He found his calling and saw how his work could change people's lives. He realized that the most important thing is to connect with roots, with family, and with those who inspire. Their house has become a symbol of perseverance, love, and memory. And Mabel, despite her age and difficulties, continued to live a full life, surrounded by those who loved and respected her. Their story together has become not only an inspiration for their family, but also a lesson for everyone who has heard about them. It's never too late to create something meaningful and leave a mark on this world. Life in the house on Jackson Street gradually entered a new, unusually vivid rhythm. After Mabel's recovery, the house finally became the living heart of their community. The family museum, organized by his grandson, has become not only a place to preserve history, but also a center of communication, inspiration, and creativity. People went to this house not only for memories, but also for the feeling of warmth that reigned there. After the exhibition, Jamal began to think about how to develop their joint project further. He understood that the stories he and his grandmother had saved were just the beginning. Every person in their neighborhood had their own roots, their own memories, which also deserved to be heard. Jamal decided to organize a series of meetings at the house on Jackson Street, where everyone could come and share the stories of their families. It was an unusual gathering where people talked about their ancestors, showed photos and things that were dear to them. Such evenings became a new ritual for the community, a time when it was possible to unite and remember that each of them is a part of something bigger. The success of these meetings inspired Jamal to start a new project. He decided that the stories collected in their house should be recorded and preserved. Together with several friends, he began to create a book that would chronicle their community. He called it The Voices of Jackson Street. In this book, everyone could tell their own story, and Jamal added his own illustrations to these stories. The project quickly attracted the attention of not only their small town, but also the larger cities in the area. Journalists began writing articles about the house, the family museum, and Jamal's work. Mabel was the pride of her community. Despite her age, she remained incredibly active. She not only shared her stories, but also inspired others not to be afraid to open up about their past. Her speeches at the meetings became real events, which people came to hear her advice, life lessons, and just laugh at her ironic remarks. But the most important thing was that Mabel showed that life can be full at any age. She began to help young women by sharing her thoughts and experiences with them. Her fortitude has become an example of how you can stay true to yourself despite all the trials. For Jamal, working on the book and organizing events at the house on Jackson Street became not just a career, but his life's work. He no longer felt lost or disappointed. Every new project, every new story reminded him how important what he was doing was. He began to receive invitations to participate in exhibitions in other cities. His paintings, inspired by the history of Jackson Street, became famous outside their small community. But for Jamal, it was not so much a success as an opportunity to talk about what is really important to him. At one of the exhibitions, he presented a new series of works called Warmth of the Roots. Each painting told the story of a family or a person who lived on Jackson Street. These works aroused great interest and helped to draw attention to their book, Voices of Jackson Street. One of the most important changes in Jamal's life was to reconnect with the rest of his family. After they saw the contribution he had made to the preservation of their history, they began to come to the house on Jackson Street more often. Brothers, sisters, uncles and aunts all wanted to be part of this movement inspired by Mabel and Jamal. These family gatherings have become an important ritual. They not only strengthen their bond, but also help to convey to the younger generation the love of their roots. Mabel, watching her great-grandchildren playing in the yard, laughed and said that the house had finally come to life again. Jamal started thinking about how to make their legacy last. He decided to create a foundation that would support other families in preserving their history. This foundation would help organize archives, hold exhibitions, and publish books like The Voices of Jackson Street. For Jamal, it was a way to pay tribute to his grandmother, who showed him how important it is to remember his roots. Now, he wanted as many people as possible to do the same for their families. The house on Jackson Street remained the place where the past and the present met to create the future. Mabel continued to inspire everyone around her by her example, and Jamal finally found his place in life. Together, they showed how love, care, and respect for their roots can change not only a family, but also an entire community. And although life went on, filled with new events, their story always remained in the heart of everyone who heard about the house on Jackson Street. It was a legacy that cannot be forgotten, vivid, vibrant, and full of power. The success of the book, Voices of Jackson Street, and the exhibition inspired Jamal to take further steps. The house, which was a symbol of family memory, has now become a center for many people who sought to preserve their heritage. But every day, Jamal felt more and more strongly that their efforts were not enough. He saw how many stories remained forgotten, how many family archives are covered with dust in attics, and after all, each of these stories could become not just a memory, but also a lesson for future generations. One evening, sitting on the porch of the house with Mabel, he finally decided to discuss his idea with her.
Grandma, I keep thinking about our exhibition. It was something incredible, but I have one thought all the time. We could have done more. Do you remember those people who came to us and told us about their families? They want to keep their stories too.
Of course I remember. One woman even brought me a picture of her great-grandmother. She said that no one had seen her in the last 40 years. It touched me to the core. But what do you mean when you say do more?
I'm thinking about the foundation, something like an organization that would help people preserve their heritage. We could offer assistance in restoring photographs, recording stories and creating archives. And not only here on Jackson Street, but also in other places that...
You want me to become a director, right? So that I can sit in the office and sign papers?
No, Grandma, I'm not asking you to give up your tea parties and rocking chair, but you could be the face of the foundation. People love you, they listen to you, and I'll take care of the organizational part.
It's the face of the foundation, you say? That sounds good, but do you realize that this is a huge job, my boy? Are you ready for this?
Yes, I am. We've already done so much, Grandma. This project has helped not only me, but also many people around us. Now I want our work to become something more than just a family chronicle.
Well, Jamal, if you're ready, then I'm ready. But keep in mind, I will be your main critic. If you do something wrong, I will not be silent.
Agreed. I'm counting on your honesty.
After this conversation, Jamal began to make a plan of action. The first step was to create a foundation structure. He carefully considered what services the organization would be able to offer: digitization and restoration of old photographs, assistance in compiling family trees, conducting interviews with elderly family members to record their memories. Each of these tasks required skills, resources, and time. Jamal turned to his friends for support, many of whom liked the idea. One of them, Kevin, was a professional photographer and agreed to help with the restoration of the pictures. Another friend, Sarah, worked as a historian and offered to help with archiving and creating chronological descriptions. Gradually, the team began to form.
You know, Jamal, I've been wanting to do something meaningful for a long time. I have so many old films at home that I have restored for myself. If I can help others preserve their family memory, it will be the best reward for me.
You have no idea how grateful I am to you for this, Kevin. We're starting small, but who knows where this will lead us?
Jamal, this album is all that's left of my grandmother. If it weren't for people like you, I would never have known who she was. So I don't just want to help, I have to do it.
Then let's start together. We will create something that will live long after us.
The next stage was to attract financing. Jamal organized a small presentation where he told local businessmen and representatives of the city administration about his idea. He showed the results of the exhibition and the book Voices of Jackson Street to demonstrate how valuable a stored memory can be. The presentation was attended by Mabel herself, who captivated the audience with her charm and sharp mind.
Many of you know me. I've lived on Jackson Street for most of my life, and I can tell you that there is nothing more important than remembering where you came from. This foundation is not just my grandson's project. This is a way to preserve our roots and pass them on to our children and grandchildren. Think about it.
Her words touched the audience, and Jamal was able to enlist the support of several sponsors. This was the beginning of a new stage in their project. The foundation, which they called Roots and Crowns, began its work with several small projects. They helped restore the family archive of an elderly couple, conducted interviews with a World War II veteran, and digitized dozens of photographs that might otherwise have been lost forever. With each successful project, the foundation gained popularity. People came not only for help, but also to share their stories. Mabel has become a kind of mentor for visitors, inspiring them to open up and talk about their past.
Darling, don't be afraid to tell your story. Everything you've been through is part of your strength, and you're not alone. We are all here to support each other.
For Jamal, the foundation became not only the realization of his dream, but also a way to continue the work he started with his grandmother. Every day, he saw how their efforts changed people's lives, and it gave him the strength to move on. The Roots and Crowns Foundation became not just an organization, but a movement that reminded people of the value of family memory and the power of history. Jamal got the idea to organize a cultural festival on Jackson Street during one of his working evenings. Sitting at the table in the living room, he sorted through the photos that the neighbors had brought and felt that this was not enough. There was a story in every picture, and every story deserved to be heard. But the stories and photographs remained scattered. Then it occurred to him, why not get everyone together? A festival dedicated to the history and culture of their area could be a way to bring people together, remind them of the value of their past, and inspire them to preserve their memory.
Grandma, what if we do something like a party on Jackson Street? Something big where everyone can tell their story, show their photos, or even cook a family meal. It will bring people together, won't it?
Do you want to have a festival? Here? On our old street? My boy, do you understand what this means? People, noise, music, children who will turn the whole yard upside down? Are you ready for this?
Yes, I'm ready. This is how I see it. An exhibition of photographs, musical performances, master classes, even a culinary corner where you can try old family recipes. It's not just going to be a celebration, it's going to be a whole event.
You're so fired up with this idea that I can't even say no. Okay, I'll support you, but keep in mind I'm not going to run after kids who steal my lemonade.
Agreed, you will be our guest of honor. And also, Grandma, you're going to have to tell a couple of stories. People want to hear from you.
Oh, Jamal, do you want me to perform? Okay, but only if you make me tea before the start.
Jamal immediately started the organization. The first step was to coordinate with the local administration. He prepared a presentation explaining that the festival would be dedicated to the cultural and historical values of their area. The city authorities enthusiastically embraced his idea, allocating a small grant to organize the event. The next step was to work with the neighbors. Jamal, along with friends and volunteers, toured every house on Jackson Street, explaining the concept of the festival. He invited people to participate, bring vintage photos, share recipes, tell stories. Some were skeptical of the idea at first, but Jamal's enthusiasm infected many. A festival, you say? What can I bring there? I only have old magazines and a couple of pots from my great-grandmother left.
That's wonderful, Mrs. Green. These pots could have been part of your family's history. You can tell us how your ancestors cooked their dishes and even show it to people.
Maybe it's really worth a try. I have an old pie recipe that was passed down in our family. But do you promise that the children won't eat everything while I'm looking away?
I promise I will personally protect them.
Gradually, the whole area began to prepare. People took out old things, wrote stories, rehearsed songs, and cooked dishes. Jackson Street came alive. It seemed that every house was suddenly filled with energy and expectation of something big. The day of the festival turned out to be sunny. The street was decorated with garlands, tables were placed along the sidewalk, each with antique objects, photographs and dishes. In one corner, children were painting under the guidance of volunteers. In the other, live music played by local musicians. Mabel was sitting in her rocking chair outside the house, watching everything with a smile.
You see, Jack, our boy did it. I never thought he would be able to bring so many people together.
Well, he took after Grandma, that's for sure. And what are you going to tell me, Mabel?
Wait, Jack, you'll find out everything, but first, I want to try that Mrs. Green pie.
The center of the festival was a stage where everyone could perform and tell the story of their family. People shared memories of how their ancestors moved to Jackson Street, how they struggled with difficulties and built their homes. The stories were filled with laughter, tears, and pride.
Risa first moved here, it was a completely different street. The houses were modest and life was simple, but each house had its own story, its own struggle, and its own love. Today, I see that this street is not just a place where we live. This is our past, our present, and our future.
People applauded, some wiped away tears. For many, it was not just an event, but a real lesson about how important it is to remember your roots. The festival was a huge success. Jamal was amazed by the number of people who came to share their stories. People thanked him for the opportunity to remember and show their culture. Some families who had not communicated for a long time reunited at this festival.
Grandma, it was incredible. Did you see how people reacted? They shared their stories, laughed, cried. I didn't even expect it to elicit such a response.
That's because you reminded them that their stories are important. No one wants to be forgotten, Jamal. You gave them a chance to be heard.
The festival has become not only a celebration but also the beginning of new projects. After the success of the event, Jamal decided to make such meetings annual. The festival helped people realize the value of their family stories and inspired many to start recording their memories and preserving antique objects. It was a day that united everyone on Jackson Street, a day that showed how the power of memory can inspire and connect generations. After successfully organizing a cultural festival on Jackson Street, Jamal felt that he had not only strengthened ties in the community, but also moved closer to reconnecting with his own family. The festival became a catalyst that began to unite relatives who had long dispersed to different cities and countries. Jamal realized that their stories, preserved in the family chronicle, could become the bridge that would connect them again. Jamal's family was big, but over the years they began to lose touch with each other. Many have moved to different states, and some have moved outside the country. Disagreements, misunderstandings, and just life circumstances have alienated them. But the exhibition, the festival, and Jamal's efforts inspired relatives to return to their roots. Many of them saw the photos, heard the stories that Jamal and Mabel had saved, and started writing and calling, expressing gratitude for preserving their family memory. Jamal started receiving calls from his aunts, uncles, and cousins. Some told how the festival inspired them to search for their old albums. Others, how they want to participate in the further preservation of family history. Jamal felt that this was the first step towards a reunion. Realizing that talking on the phone was not enough, Jamal offered to arrange a big family meeting on Jackson Street. He understood that it would not be easy. It was necessary to find the right time, take into account the opinions and schedules of dozens of people. But Jamal didn't give up. Together with Mabel, he made a list of all the relatives they could remember, and began writing a letter to each of them. The letters were sincere and warm. In each of them, Jamal talked about the work done, how their family history comes to life through photographs and stories, and how important it is to keep this connection. He invited them to Jackson Street, where they could not only meet, but also continue working on the family chronicle, adding new chapters. The answers started coming quickly. Some immediately agreed to come, some expressed doubts, but most were touched and intrigued. Even those who had not communicated with the family for years showed interest. Jamal and Maybelle were diligently preparing for the big event. The house on Jackson Street, which had already become a cultural center for neighbors, was now supposed to host dozens of relatives. They had vacated the living room to accommodate photographs, albums, and items from the family archive. Large tables were set up in the courtyard, decorated with flowers and simple but stylish fabrics. A corner with games was organized for children, and a zone for memories for adults, where they could sit over a cup of tea and talk. Mabel insisted on making the kitchen come alive again. She decided to cook several traditional dishes that once united their family at the same table. She remembered the recipes her mother had made and shared them with Jamal. For her, it wasn't just cooking, it was an act of passing on traditions. The long-awaited day has arrived. Relatives started arriving in the morning. Many of them haven't been to Jackson Street in decades. They looked with surprise and awe at the house, which, despite its age, remained warm and cozy, as if inviting them to return to their childhood. The meeting began with a short tour of the house. Jamal showed photographs, told the stories he had recorded, and showed off new discoveries made in recent months. The relatives laughed, remembering their childhood years, discussed how they had changed, and shared memories that they themselves had kept in their hearts for a long time. For many, it was not just a reunion with their family, but also with their own past. One of Jamal's aunts, Laura, brought an old album that she found in her basement. There were photos in it that no one had ever seen. She cried, telling how these pictures reminded her of her father, who died when she was still a child. The cousins, who had not spoken for many years due to a long-standing conflict, sat down at the same table. Under the influence of the general atmosphere, they began to talk for the first time in a long time. The older family members shared stories that they had previously kept to themselves. Some talked about the difficulties they had overcome, others about the joys that had now become part of their common history. The meeting also became an opportunity to work on a family chronicle. Jamal put a large table in a prominent place, with blank pages on which everyone could write their story, add a photo, or just share their thoughts. Some brought letters and documents that they had kept for a long time to add to the general archive. Jamal was most touched by how people began to see themselves as part of something bigger. Everyone realized that their stories are important, that they are not just individuals, but parts of a single family tree that continues to grow. The family meeting on Jackson Street was a turning point for the whole family. People who had moved away a long time ago and forgot about their roots felt like part of one big story again. Relatives who had not communicated for years began to reconnect. The younger generation saw how important it is to know their history and respect those who came before them. For Jamal, this was proof that his efforts were not in vain. He not only helped to preserve the memory of the past, but also inspired the family to take new steps. Now their story continued to live not only in the annals, but also in the hearts of the people who were a part of it. The family reunion was a confirmation for Jamal and Mabel that their work matters. They saw how stored memory can not only inspire, but also unite. It was a day that changed their family forever, filling it with new powers and new stories that continued to be created. After the family meeting, which was the emotional culmination of the last few months, Jamal felt inspired like never before. He finally realized that his work is not just self-expression, but also a way to preserve the memory of what is really important. This idea became the starting point for his new series of paintings, which was called The Echo of Generations. Looking through the photos and recordings taken at the festival and the family meeting, Jamal noticed how unique and, at the same time, universal the stories that people shared. Each photo, each story had its own depth: pride, pain, joy, overcoming. These emotions became for him the material that he wanted to transfer to the canvas. He saw how the past and the present intertwine in people's destinies, how memories shape their lives. Jamal decided that his next series of paintings would be dedicated to these moments, the connections between generations, the invisible threads that connect us with our ancestors. His works were supposed to be not just visual images, but real emotional journeys. Jamal started with the preparation. He took out old notebooks where he had once made sketches and began to restudy artistic techniques in order to express his ideas most vividly. Inspiration was all around him: photographs, stories of his family and neighbors, objects he found in attics or in boxes on Jackson Street. Every detail filled his plans with meaning. His first work, which he called Intertwined Roots, was based on a family tree that he and his grandmother had been working on for several months. Jamal depicted a huge tree rooted in the ground. There was something symbolic in each bark and each leaf: the faces of ancestors, images of old houses, objects that were passed down from generation to generation. The work turned out to be so detailed that viewers could spend hours looking at it, finding new details. After the first picture, Jamal realized that he wanted to delve into the topic of emotions related to memory. His next work, Echo of Voices, was dedicated to people who told their stories at the festival. There were abstract silhouettes on the canvas, surrounded by waves, like a sound coming from the past. Each wave reflected the memories, the voices, of the ancestors that continued to resound in our lives. This work aroused special emotions in Jamal. He realized how important words and stories are, how they shape our perception of the world. For him, this painting became not only a work of art, but also a way to express his gratitude to everyone who shared their stories. Each painting in the series was unique, not only in its plot, but also in its color scheme. Jamal used bright and saturated colors to depict joy and success, and warmer, earthy shades for those paintings that dealt with loss and struggle. His palette spoke no less than the images themselves. He wanted the viewer to feel the energy of these stories through color and texture. One of his most significant works was the painting Fragments of Memory. It was an abstract composition in which the elements of memories, old photographs, letters, objects, seemed to fly to pieces, but at the same time formed into a new integral image. The painting symbolized how our perception of the past is formed from many fragments that we keep in our memory. When Jamal started showing his work to friends and neighbors, he was amazed by their reaction. When people found their own stories reflected in his paintings, they said that his works make them think about their ancestors, about how their lives are connected with the past. Sarah, his friend and historian, offered to organize an exhibition to share this series with a wide audience. Jamal was hesitant at first, but then agreed. He realized that his paintings are not just art. They are a way to inspire people to appreciate their history. The preparation for the exhibition was the next stage of his work. Jamal carefully selected the paintings, compiled a description for each of them so that the audience could understand its meaning. He decided to name the exhibition the same way as the series, Echo of Generations. This name perfectly reflected its essence, how the past resonates in the present. The exhibition was planned at a local gallery, but thanks to the support of the Roots and Crowns Foundation, its format was expanded. In addition to the paintings, the exhibition was planned to show videos with the stories of people whose stories inspired Jamal. This added interactivity and made the exhibition an even deeper experience. For the exhibition, Jamal decided to create a central work that would combine all the themes of the series. He called it Streams of Time. On a huge canvas, he depicted rivers that cross each other, symbolizing generations. On each river, there were images of people, events, and objects that played a key role in the transmission of heritage. This painting became the most difficult in his career. He worked on it for several months, adding details that were supposed to tell the viewer that memory is not something static, but a living stream that continues to flow through us. The opening day of the exhibition was an important event not only for Jamal, but also for the entire community. People came to see paintings that reflected their own stories. Many brought their children to show them the importance of preserving memory. The painting's streams of time caused a special delight. People found echoes of their own memories in it. Some cried, looking at her because she reminded them of loved ones who were no longer there. The exhibition not only strengthened Jamal's connection with his community, but also helped to draw attention to the importance of preserving family histories. Many visitors were inspired by his work and began recording their memories, searching for old photos and sharing them with loved ones. For Jamal, this was a confirmation that his work is important. He saw how his art could inspire, unite, and heal. Each painting from the Echo of Generations series has become a symbol of how memory continues to live in and through us. The creation of the Echo of Generations series was not just a stage in Jamal's career, but also an act of deep research into human memory. His paintings became a visual chronicle that connected the past and the present. The exhibition strengthened him as an artist and storyteller, making his work significant not only for the local community, but also for a wider audience. After the success of the Echo of Generations series and an exhibition held at a local gallery, Jamal suddenly found himself in the spotlight of a wide audience. His works, steeped in history, memory, and family ties, resonated with audiences far beyond Jackson Street. However, Jamal himself did not immediately realize the scale of what was happening. His attention was focused on continuing his work, but the wave of interest in his art had already begun to gain momentum. After the end of the exhibition, at a local gallery, the organizers offered Jamal to send his works to a competition in one of the largest national art platforms. It was an annual competition dedicated to contemporary art, where artists from all over the country presented their work to gain recognition and support. Jamal hesitated for a long time. It seemed to him that his works, based on personal stories, might not be interesting enough for a wide audience. But his grandmother Mabel and friends convinced him to try. He sent several key paintings from the Echo of Generations series, including Intertwined Roots and Streams of Time. A few weeks later, a letter came with the news. His works were selected, and he became one of the participants in the exhibition at the largest art center in the country. For Jamal, it was an unexpected but inspiring event. When Jamal received confirmation that his work would be presented at the national exhibition, he realized that he had to approach this with special attention. His paintings now not only symbolized his own history, but also represented his community and family in front of a wide audience. He began to refine his work, adding details and making small changes to better convey his idea. He also prepared explanatory texts for each painting so that the audience could better understand its context. To do this, he turned back to the family chronicle, drawing inspiration from the stories of his grandmother and other relatives. His neighbors and friends actively supported him, helping him prepare for the trip. Someone helped arrange the transportation of paintings, someone wrote letters of support, and some just came to cheer him up before an important event. Jackson Street rallied around Jamal, proud that their story would now become nationally known. The opening day of the exhibition at the Art Center was exciting for Jamal. His paintings were placed in a spacious hall where light and composition emphasized every detail of his work. In addition to the audience, critics, curators, and famous artists were present at the exhibition. When the first visitors began to approach his paintings, Jamal stood aside, watching their reactions. He was amazed at how people looked at the details, discussed them among themselves, and asked questions. His works evoked a variety of emotions from the audience. Someone smiled, remembering their family traditions. Someone stood with a thoughtful look, and some even cried. The painting's Streams of Time aroused particular interest. People found something personal about her, even if they had never heard of Jackson Street. It was a universal work that spoke about memory, about generations, and about the connection between them. A few days after the opening of the exhibition, Jamal began to receive the first reviews. Critics have praised his work, noting its emotional depth, sincerity, and attention to detail. An article appeared in one of the famous art magazines with the headline, "The Voice of Memory: How Jamal Mason Preserves History Through Art." The article emphasized that his works are unique in that they combine personal stories with universal themes that are understandable to everyone. His social media began to fill up quickly with messages from people who had seen his paintings. They wrote how his work inspired them to explore their own roots, restore family ties, or simply reflect on the importance of memory. Some viewers even sent their old photos and told their family stories, inspired by his example. The success of the exhibition opened up many opportunities for Jamal. His works attracted the attention of curators from other cities who wanted to show them in their galleries. He began receiving invitations to participate in group and solo exhibitions all over the country. One of these exhibitions was an exposition dedicated to the connection of generations, which was held in New York. There, Jamal presented a new work created specifically for this exhibition. The painting, called The Thread of Time, depicted Mabel's grandmother in the center, surrounded by images of her ancestors and descendants. This work became not only a tribute to his grandmother, but also a symbol of how she inspired him to do everything he does. As his popularity grew, Jamal realized that his mission was not only to create art, but also to teach. He began to participate in educational projects, talking about how important it is to preserve family memory. His masterclasses, where he taught how to create visual stories, became popular among young people and adults. One of the most significant projects was the cooperation with the Roots and Crowns Foundation. Together with a team of like-minded people, Jamal began organizing events where people could bring their family photos and stories to create unique art objects from them. This project not only popularized his work, but also helped people to better understand the value of their own heritage. Despite his success and busy schedule, Jamal never forgot about his roots. After each exhibition and project, he returned to Jackson Street to be with his grandmother and family. For him, this place remained a source of inspiration and strength. On Jackson Street, he continued to work on new projects, looking for inspiration in simple but meaningful things. Conversations with neighbors, old letters, stories from his grandmother. Every time he returned, he felt that his work was just beginning. Reaching the national level was not just a career achievement for Jamal, but also an opportunity to share his vision of the world with a huge number of people. His art, based on personal and family stories, proved that even the most local themes can become universal. Now he felt that his mission was not only to create art, but also to inspire people to remember, appreciate, and pass on their history. After Jamal's work gained national recognition, he began to think about how his success could serve not only for self-realization, but also to inspire others. The inspiration for this idea, as always, was Mabel. Her wisdom, energy, and contribution to the preservation of their family history prompted Jamal to think that it was necessary to create something more durable, a project that would help people preserve their roots and pass them on to the next generations. During one of his visits to Jackson Street, Jamal spent a lot of time thinking about how his art had changed other people's lives. His exhibitions and projects inspired many people to start exploring their family histories, but he realized that for many it was still a difficult process. There is often not enough knowledge, resources, or support to collect and preserve the family legacy. Then he decided that the next stage of his mission would be to create a foundation that would help people across the country explore their roots, preserve them, and turn them into art. Jamal called this project the Roots and Crowns Foundation, emphasizing the symbolism of the tree. The roots are the past, and the crown is the future, which grows thanks to these roots. Jamal and his team started by planning the foundation's structure. He decided that the main areas of activity would be 1. Educational programs, conducting master classes and seminars dedicated to the preservation of family history. These could be lessons on digitizing old photographs, recording the memories of the older generation, or creating art projects based on family stories. 2. Grants support, the provision of small grants for families or communities who want to preserve their history but do not have the necessary funds for this, for example, to restore old photos, record interviews, or publish a family book. 3. Creation of archives, assistance in creating local archives where residents could save their family documents, photographs, and stories. 4. Holding exhibitions and events, organizing exhibitions like those that Jamal did to show how history can be transformed into art. 5. Interactive platforms, the development of online resources where people could share their stories and find inspiration in the experiences of others. The launch of the Roots and Crowns Foundation was an important event for Jamal and Mabel. They held an official opening at the house on Jackson Street, which became the symbolic center of this project. The event brought together friends, relatives, and community representatives who saw how Jamal's ideas changed their lives. The opening day included an exhibition of Jamal's work, stories about the foundation's creation process, and a live recording of Mabel's memories. This event marked the beginning of a new stage in their lives. The people who came to the opening immediately began to share their ideas and stories, offering cooperation and support. One of the foundation's first projects was the Living Memories Initiative. It was a tour in which the foundation's team traveled to small towns and villages, holding meetings with local residents. They recorded their memories, collected old photographs and documents, and helped compile family trees. This project quickly gained popularity. People thanked the foundation for the opportunity to save their stories. Some even learned details about their ancestors for the first time through such meetings. This strengthened Jamal's confidence that he had chosen the right path. Another important initiative of the foundation was the creation of a traveling exhibition, Voices of Roots. This exhibition included Jamal's paintings, photographs, and objects collected as part of the Living Memories project. The exhibition traveled to different cities, attracting more and more attention and provoking a positive response. The activities of the Roots and Crowns Foundation began to have a profound impact on people. Families that had long lost touch with each other began to rebuild their relationships. The younger generation, inspired by the foundation's projects, became interested in the history of their ancestors. Many children and teenagers have started creating their own family albums, painting pictures, or writing stories inspired by Jamal's work. In some cities, local authorities, inspired by the success of the foundation, began to support the creation of local archives and museums. Jamal has received numerous invitations to speak at heritage preservation events, where he shared his experiences and inspired others. Over time, the fund began to grow. Jamal's team was joined by professional historians, archivists, artists, and organizers. They helped to develop new areas of the foundation's activities, including the creation of educational programs for schools. Teachers used these materials to teach children about the importance of preserving family history. The foundation also began to cooperate with major museums and galleries, which provided their own venues for exhibitions and seminars. This helped to draw attention to the topic of heritage conservation at the national level. For Jamal, the foundation has become not just a professional achievement, but also a personal mission. He saw how his work helps people feel connected to their past and understand themselves better. Each new project of the foundation reminded him of how his grandmother inspired him to do all this. For Mabel, the foundation has become a symbol of her legacy. She was proud that her stories, her life, had become the basis for something so meaningful. She gladly continued to participate in the foundation's projects, met with people, and talked about her experience. Her wisdom and strength of spirit inspired everyone who communicated with her. The creation of the Roots and Crowns Foundation was the culmination of all Jamal and Mabel's efforts. This project combined their family history, Jamal's work, and their desire to help others preserve their roots. The foundation has become not only a way to inspire people, but also an important tool for preserving cultural heritage. For Jamal and Mabel, it was a way to show that memory is not just memories. It is a force that can unite generations, inspire creativity, and give people a sense of belonging. Their story, which began with a small house on Jackson Street, became an example of how loving your past can change lives. Years have passed since the foundation of the Roots and Crowns Foundation. His activities have spread to many regions, turning into a national movement for the preservation of family histories. But for Jamal and Mabel, it wasn't just a professional achievement. It became a life's work that united them, their family, and their community. The house on Jackson Street remained the center of their world, where everything began and where everything returned. Jackson Street has long ceased to be just a quiet street in a small town. Thanks to the Foundation's work, this area has become a place known far beyond their city. The museum at Mabel's house attracted visitors from all over the country. People came to see not only Jamal's paintings, but also to get to know the story that inspired him. Mabel and Jamal themselves continued to live a busy life. Despite her age, Mabel remained active and energetic. She became an honorary consultant to the Foundation, helping new teams organize archives and conduct educational programs. Her wisdom and charisma made her a favorite of the public, and she was happy to share her stories at numerous meetings. For Jamal, the Foundation became not only a way to express his gratitude to his grandmother, but also an opportunity to pass on her legacy to a new generation. He continued to paint, creating new works inspired not only by the past, but also by the present. His paintings became increasingly mature, complex, and symbolic, reflecting both personal and social changes. Jamal's family began to take an increasingly active part in the Foundation's activities. Their children, Mabel's great-grandchildren, spent summers at her house, helping at the mosaics, decorating paintings, and learning to resay with better clippers. Jamal's family began to take an increasingly active part in the Foundation's activities. Jamal's family began to release. Mabel's great-granddaughter, 16-year-old Tiana, stood out in particular. The girl showed great interest in art and history. She often watched Jamal work, asking questions about the process of creating his paintings and the meaning of his work. Seeing her enthusiasm, Jamal began to teach her the basics of painting, sharing his knowledge and experience. Tiana became part of a new generation that recognized the importance of its roots. She began creating her own works inspired by Mabel's stories. Her style was fresh, modern, but there was a deep connection with tradition in it. Jamal was proud that she was adopting his mission, but at the same time contributing something of her own. The Roots and Crowns Foundation continued to grow. Jamal decided that the next step would be to expand educational programs to reach young people. He developed a project called Roots of the Future, which included educational programs for schools and colleges. These programs helped young people to study their family history and express it through art. One of the most successful initiatives was the Let's Remember Together program. Its essence was for the older generation to share their memories with young people, and they, in turn, turned these stories into art projects. Exhibitions created within the framework of this program were held throughout the country, causing delight among the audience and participants. The Foundation has also started cooperation with major museums and educational organizations. Thanks to this, the Foundation's projects have attracted international attention. In one of the articles dedicated to the Foundation, he was called an example of how history can be preserved and reinterpreted through creativity. Despite their success and recognition, Jamal and Mabel never forgot about their home on Jackson Street. This place remained for them a symbol of their history and the beginning of their journey. They regularly organized family gatherings and events for neighbors, maintaining the spirit of the community. One summer evening, sitting on the porch, Mabel looked thoughtfully at the starry sky. She knew her life was nearing its end, but she felt proud of everything she and Jamal had achieved. The house on Jackson Street was no longer just a place where she had lived her life. It has become a symbol of memory, hope, and love. She shared her thoughts with Jamal, saying she was ready to hand over the house to him and the next generation. It was a touching moment for Jamal. He promised to keep the house the way Mabel had always known it and continue their business. A few months later, Jamal organized an event at the house on Jackson Street, which he called The Legacy of Light. It was an evening exhibition where the paintings, photographs, and archives of the family were illuminated with soft light, creating an atmosphere of warmth and comfort. The event attracted many guests, including both old family friends and new fans of their work. At the end of the evening, Jamal presented a new work, which he called The Light of the Roots. It was a huge painting depicting a tree with shining leaves, each of which symbolized a story told by him or the foundation. The painting caused a storm of applause and became the center of attention of the exhibition. For Mabel, this event was an important moment. She saw her dreams of preserving memory come true and felt that her mission was accomplished. She knew that Jamal, Tiana, and other members of their family would continue her work. Jamal, in turn, felt responsible for continuing their work. He understood that Mabel's legacy was not just stories and paintings. This is the spirit of unity and love that should live on in the next generations. The story of Jamal and Mabel marked the beginning of a new phase for their family and community. The house on Jackson Street continued to live, filled with laughter, conversation, and creativity. The foundation's work has spread throughout the country, inspiring people to preserve their history. But most importantly, the legacy of Mabel and Jamal has become an example of how loving your past can be a source of strength, inspiration, and change. Their story reminded us that memory is not just memories, but a living stream that connects us to our roots and helps us grow.